I'd like to talk to you about the idea of having an archetype that rules you. So this is quite similar to the idea of having a spirit animal. The spirit animal, as I talked about in my last video, there's the one that you kind of feel drawn to that has a message for you, like I do with the snail. And then there's the one that's more like your typecasting, like what kind of animal would you be cast as if you were in Wind of the Willows? For me, that would be a bear. This is along a similar vein where you think, okay, what kind of characters would you probably be cast as? Like if you were in a film, what character would you be? And again, sometimes this can be a bitter pill to swallow. It's not necessarily the one that you'd want sometimes. The way that I got to know my archetype was through working with Jonathan Kay, learning fooling. And part of that is to get to know. It's a really powerful journey to go on, because there was a moment when I did an ayahuasca ceremony. I think I've talked about this before. I was in an ayahuasca ceremony and I felt myself become the goddess, and I could feel the power of the goddess in me. I am one facet of a whole huge jewel that is the goddess, and every single feminine aspect of everybody, male, female, it doesn't matter, the feminine aspect of all of us, including animals and plants and everything, they are all a facet of this whole jewel. And there's the idea, Jonathan talks about individuals, it's your inner divine jewel. We all have an inner divine jewel, and our jewel is a facet of this overall jewel, which is masculine and the feminine. And I have a masculine element, I have a feminine element, and there are different archetypes that I feel linked to that are masculine and feminine, but sometimes there's quite a strong overriding one. Sometimes people have a few and it's not as clear cut as one. I definitely have a few, but there's one that I feel much more strongly connected to than the others. And some people, theirs is really clear. And it is kind of useful to think of it in terms of theatre, because it's useful to think of life in terms of theatre in general. I mean, when I worked with Jonathan, one of the things that's really brilliant about his teaching is that he's doing it under the guise of theatre. He could easily be a guru, like he is a guru, but he's choosing to do it as theatre, and so therefore it's not a spiritual practice, and therefore it stops him being put into a guru position. But what he's teaching is the most powerful sacred magic I've ever come across. You know, it's not like, oh, I'm doing a spell, fine with that, you know, that's great, but this is like actual physical work that you can do that manifests and completely changes your world, and it's so powerful. So the more you get to know what archetype rules you, what your spirit animals are, what your muse looks like, all of these different things, they teach you to bring your inner world out. And in doing that, your outer world becomes more just pleasurable for you to be in, because it looks more like your inner world. And we all want to see your inner world, because when you die, you'll take your inner world with you, and none of us will ever see that again. Like, there's one opportunity for your inner world to be shown outwardly to the world, and that is through you being alive now and creating with your inner world. And this is another colour in your paint palette to paint with. So what is your archetype? Archetypes are kind of caricatures. So it is like typecasting again. So you have the temptress, the poisoner, the trickster, the fool, the master, the hero, the lovers, the priestess. You know, obviously the tarot high arcana are all archetypes. Kind of religious figures are archetypes. Characters from mythology, gods, goddesses. All of these things are archetypes. There's even an archetype of a supermarket. I mean, if I say, here I am at the supermarket, you will all be able to go along with me being at a supermarket, even though there's nothing behind me except for my altar. But you can dress behind me with a supermarket. Here I am at the supermarket, looking at the fresh veg, and there's someone next to me coughing, and I'm wondering how come they don't know what a meter looks like. I'm angry, and off I go into a play. Like that's how you do a fooling structure to get into a play. And it works on the basis of me, the performer, knowing that you, the audience, knows what a supermarket is, because there is an archetype of a supermarket. If I asked all of you to go and individually draw me the supermarket you see behind me, they would all be completely different. There's something archetypal about the way that an audience all laughs together at a funny point in a performance. If you stopped and asked everyone why they laughed, they'd all say something different. But archetypally, they work together as an audience and all laugh at the same time. So there's this kind of like very big picture thing going on that is pretty amazing stuff. And when I felt like I turned into the goddess, it wasn't like I was all facets of the goddess. I really got very clearly what facet I was of the goddess, and I just fully became it and thoroughly relished and enjoyed a moment of just being utterly myself. Like not my self ego, like the bigger self, the other thing that I share with other things on this planet. There's lots of us that share this archetype, and for a moment I was the archetype and not the inner divine jewel that's scurrying around the world with an ego called Jolie. So it's wonderful. It's a wonderful thing to experience and to play with and to work with. And I feel like it's a bit like a puppet master, that when you don't realise that the archetype is controlling you, then you are its puppet. Whereas when you realise what your archetype is, you can start to own that archetype and then play it more, play with it, play against it. It's really interesting to go against the grain. The more you go against the grain, kind of the more interesting the effects are, actually. In all ways, it's good to do that. You know, like with my spirit animal being a bear, if a bear's trying to be a ballerina, as we see in Disney films and things all the time, that something about that's really beautiful. We love it. There's something fun about it. The going against the grain is always fun to watch, because that's actually what all drama is. Drama is conflict. You know, if you've just got someone going, do you want to eat some cake? Yes, that's not a play. If you say, do you want to eat some cake? I'm gluten intolerant. Then we have a play. So you need conflict for anything to happen. And so we're always kind of shying away from conflict in this world, but actually we need it for anything to happen and for us to move forward. For there to be anything worth watching, paying any attention to, for drama, you need conflict. So it's good to know what your base camp is, so you know what to go against, what the grain is to go against. And to them not be a puppet to it, but to become, I feel like I'm a priestess now with this archetype. My archetype is Venus, is Aphrodite, which I feel very lucky to have. You know, I lucked out on that one. Great, thank you very much. I'm definitely like the kind of working class version. And I feel like Aphrodite is she's quite earthy, isn't she? Because there's the kind of more femme fatale. I'm definitely not mysterious femme fatale archetype. I'm definitely like Nancy from Oliver Twist. I'd say more than anything else, the landlord's daughter in The Wicker Man. If you could I could break in all the lads from the village and teach them how to how to do it. That would be my dream job. So yeah, that kind of like sort of rough around the edges. Ariel from Knights of the Flying Circus, Nanny Og. It's that kind of like old, sort of doesn't care, kind of carry on strumpet. I'm a strumpet. And it's interesting because my husband is a trickster, and he really is very clear. He's one that has very clearly one archetype, and he's a trickster. And archetypally, we belong together. So in Commedia dell'arte, the kind of strumpet character Philomena and Harlequin, the trickster, are the ones that like hang out and have a fag with each other behind the scenes. And like the main bulk of the play is all the other men chasing Philomena around and kind of the japes, the kind of carry-on japes that come from that. But there's always the kind of time out moment where Philomena and Harlequin hang out and they can actually talk to each other normally and kind of have a friendship that she doesn't have with any of the other men. So that's really nice. Like archetypally, it feels like me and my husband belong together. And yeah, once you sort of work out what your archetype is, thinking about what kind of character you'd be in films and And just things that people have said to you and things that you're into. Some of them are hard to own. I've got a friend who's Eris, the goddess of discord, and she's kind of like all of the dark Disney witches and queens rolled into one. She's really sexy, she's bloody brilliant, she's really powerful, but that's a really big cross to bear. You know, she has to live with the fact that she quite often just blows everything up and like kind of destroys everything, and she doesn't mean to, but it just that's what her archetype kind of does, and that's why it's good for her. And she knows that that's her archetype, and it's good that she knows, because then when these things happen, it's not so out of the blue. And also those who know her can kind of forgive her, and you know, it's just like that. It's just part of her makeup, is that happens, so she can learn to love that part of herself and forgive herself for it. I've learnt to own the fact that I'm a sexy motherfucker. And this is like, so all the things that are to do with Venus and Aphrodite, I now just cover myself with, which is rose. And I'm going to do a whole thing on rose, because rose is a beautiful herb that just has, I mean, I've always felt like connected to rose, but this recently, a real love affair. She's helped me come off asthma medication and has basically kept me calm through the whole of this quarantine process. So I'm going to do a whole video on rose, but I just have rose everywhere around me. I've got my roses on the altar today, because the full moon tomorrow is in Libra, which is ruled by Venus. And it's just like, I now feel like, you know, I could see myself or feel in my lineage the idea of the sacred hall and the temples of Aphrodite, and just, it's just owning it all, you know, and just going, yeah, this is part of who I am. And it means that I like really treat myself with all those things. You know, it's like finding out about the planets and what they rule and what plants they rule and what colours are associated, and foods, and just all the different things that you can then kind of pleasure your archetype with. And then it's more like you're a priestess than a puppet, because it's like you're tending to the temple of that archetype, and the temple is you. And so what can you do as offerings for that archetype? You know, for my husband being the trickster, him getting up to mischief and creating walkabout theatre for festivals and anything, that he's really good at. He's really good at setting up kind of tricks on people, like, obviously. But then, you know, things like that, it's like he's in his element when he's doing that. And so it's just looking at what are the things that are in your element. For my friend who is Eris, the goddess of discord, like at the root of all that, there's death and then rebirth. Like, you know, I mean, I'm kind of the fertility end of things. I'm the like getting sexy, getting jiggy to start things from, you know, to get pregnant, to get the things happening. She's like the other end. She's the death crone. So she's the like destructive force that floors everything for things to then grow. And in her journey of getting to own that, she's now a death doula and a birth doula, which really suits her. So it's becoming a priestess or a priest to the temple, which is you, of the archetype that you are here representing. And yeah, it's an amazing, and then you start noticing the plays that play out between you and the other archetypes, and you can be a bit more forgiving of people. I mean, even like, you know, Donald Trump, he's having to play that archetype. He's playing the archetype of the egotistical, red-faced, angry, wrathful leader. You know, he's very much an archetype. I mean, he literally looks like a spitting image character. And so he's like stepped out of the archetypal world playing that part. Now, I'm really pleased that I don't have to play that part. That part's there. Like, all of these parts are always there. So it's like there's like a set number of characters, of plot. It's like sort of almost like avatars in a computer game. Like, there's only so many that we can choose from. And I'm really glad that I'm here in this life with this archetype. I'm having a great time being this archetype. And Trump's having to be that one. And I'm, you know, kind of grateful to him that he's having to do that and not me. So it's a way of kind of being able to forgive people for their characters that they're playing. It's like, thanks for doing that for me, because it was going to be here anyway and I don't have to do it, so thanks. But yeah, it's I think a really wonderful journey to go on, to try and work out what rules you and how you can then worship it and be of service to it, rather than it being a puppet master controlling you.